Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 34, Episode 3. Coming up on the show, we've got a psychic odyssey, getting evicted from your spirit body, and the trapped spirits of the British Museum. I'm your host, Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
I happened to see this book go across your desk. What are we looking into today?
This is actually from last year, but it's just got an issue out on Kindle from Noah Angel. Ghosts of the British Museum, a true story of colonial loot and restless objects. Oh, the Colonials, they did so much damage.
What's the issue with colonial loot?
They're all evil and everything needs to be returned to its rightful Indigenous owners.
Right.
No, there's not too much of that. There's a little bit of that.
All right.
It's more like these weird viewing rooms in the British Museum where they have these ancient Egyptian artifacts and you get these New Age people coming in for private viewings. And when one of the British Museum employees walks past, there's just this woman with feathers in her hair with an Egyptian artifact on her chest lying back going, oh!
How are they allowed to touch them?
There's apparently these rooms, they're like private viewing rooms, and anyone can go. Anyone can book them. You just have to know what you want to see.
So you can look up their database and find the objects you want?
Yeah.
And request them?
Yeah.
It's kind of like a library, but...
They've got
like a national library?
8 million artifacts in the British Museum. So, of course, only about 1% of them are ever on display. So for the rest of them, if you know what you want to look at, usually you can basically make a request and you can go into one of these private libraries and spend time with an artifact. Now, she had to wear gloves and like handle it properly. And I don't think she was meant to do that. But this book is full of all these kind of funny stories in between your usual haunted spookiness that you would get in such an old institution like the British Museum.
But is it suggesting psychometry?
Well, what's great about this book from Noah Angel is I thought this would just be the usual, we spoke to the security guards and the doors flap open on their own.
Remember the classic from the 2010s of the figurine in the glass case spinning around?
Yeah.
Like, it's spinning around. It just turned out it was because of the lights on top of it was causing an expansion effect.
Well, I don't even think a lot of what they're reporting, those basic things are conventional. Like there's huge bolted doors that unlock themselves, drawers that come in and out.
So it's a bit more than just simply an object moving.
It is supernatural, but it's like boring supernatural. Who cares if a statue's spinning around? I don't really care. But he goes in there with a psychometrist, a psychic woman. And Noah goes in after gathering 7 years worth of stories from the employees. So he, after work at the pub, he speaks to the night wardens, he speaks to the curators, he speaks to the people that run the museum, and he gets all these unofficial stories. And then after gathering...
Do they know who he is, or is it that they were just kind of spilling their guts?
Yeah, they know who he is. They know he's interested in ghost stories about the British Museum. And then after he's gathered all this lore, he goes back there with a local psychic, this woman that has this skill of psychometry. And he wants to test what she can pick up and whether it correlates with what people have experienced. So there's some pretty incredible stories there. And what I was amazed at is the underground tunnels. So you've got this storage area. Like I said, 8 million artifacts, only 1% of it is on display at the British Museum at a time. But underneath, they've got the storage area. It's like
archives.
It's like Area 51 down there.
Yeah.
Most people she spoke to who had worked at the museum for 25, 30 years have never set foot in this area.
Really?
It's fully quarantined, so you've got heads of each zone. They don't know what's in each of the other zones. They're in charge of their particular block in these underground tunnels, and it's purely on need to know. And so there's these rumors of what's actually under there. One of the guys she spoke to said at the same time every year, these Ethiopian monks turn up. And is it Ethiopian? I can't remember. Wherever it is in Africa where they had Christianity and they had this connection to Christianity.
Well, isn't the Ark of the Covenant said to be hidden in Ethiopia? So that would make sense.
Yeah, so these monks come from Ethiopia and they disappear into these underground sections. And one of the rumors is that a piece from the Ark of the Covenant is in one of these sectors underneath the British Museum.
That's cool.
But no one can prove it or prove it or disprove it because no one can get access to it. It's not public knowledge. You can't sign up and go and view this area. It's like he describes it as fiefdoms, where these particular individuals control their section. But again, like a security apparatus, no one knows the big picture, and it's all need to know. So there's some juicy rumors I'll go into at the end of the show for a plus extension.
Okay, I'm looking forward to getting into that. Actually, I was reading a little bit about psychometry today, and we might cross into that a little bit later in the show. But the reason why I got into it is because actually I was looking into the work of D. Scott Rogo. Now, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you're probably familiar with some of his more well-known works like Telephone Calls from the Dead or Phone Calls from the Dead that he did with Raymond Bayless.
Yeah.
Exceptional work.
Classic.
He's a classic. He's a remarkable researcher, as is Raymond Bayless. They've done a lot of great work. But the reason why I got into D. Scott Rogo's other publications, because I didn't realize, I knew he'd published a number of books, but he's actually published a wealth of information in Fate magazine and other journals and parapsychological journals. And I was actually surprised at how he's not skeptical, but I think his approach to these paranormal topics is just a little bit more conservative than what I thought he was, right? And I think he must have changed as he progressed in his experiences, because actually where I started was I was looking through some old Jenny Randall's work, another great researcher, and I was looking into one of her books on the abduction phenomenon. And she was referencing Rogo, and she's like, look, parapsychologist D. Scott Rogo, he's actually been one of the very few people in this field who was actually boots on the ground. Like, he studied abduction cases in the field, as opposed to many who write about them without actually never going near an abductee.
Sure.
And I think that's really important when you talk about any type of researcher in this field. Like, yeah, I mean, you can have, you can make comment on things, but unless you've actually spoken to eyewitnesses and gone to locations, it's like you really can't form like a cohesive theory, I think, about what's going on. And Rogo did, but Rogo was actually approached it from a very different perspective, because he really was about parapsychology, but I emphasize the psychology, right? It's something within the mind. And he wrote back in 1985, this was in an abduction or a ufological journal, about how he says, we ourselves have somehow created the mystery and are unleashing it into the world in a vivid reality. So I'm like, oh, hang on a second. He says the abduction is a real physical event, but it reflects concerns or traumas buried within the subject's unconscious. It might be called an objectified dream. That is a system of symbolic imagery which suddenly erupts into the three-dimensional world.
Oh, so he was on the side that alien abductions were all psychic phenomena from the experiencer or the sufferer?
Absolutely. Like, you could see with him that there was a physical aspect to this, but he was very much focused on, well, hang on a second, it's not the nuts and bolts side of things, where a lot of researchers, particularly in the 80s, 70s and 80s, it was very nuts and bolts. It's like, well, hang on a second, you've got people that have experiences with UFOs and abductions and similar phenomena, but they're having, psychic precognitive experiences. They've got poltergeist in their homes. And this all seems to be somehow linked, he believed, to this psychological manifestation of whatever effects are going on within your mind. And this is being projected into a 3D reality. He doesn't go so far as to suggest that it's tulpic, like it's a tulpic form or a thought form. But that's what I get from it.
Weird that people mentally project the same looking entities and the same abduction scenarios with all the same weird details, isn't it?
I mean, the argument, pardon me, for that could be that it's like some, and I know that you don't like this, but it's like some deeply ingrained reptilian image.
The archetype.
Yeah, exactly. That's
the
like
Jungian archetype.
Yeah, which is caught within ourselves, and it manifests amongst times of stress and anxiety and,
manifesting
high
as giant-eyed bug aliens.
Yeah. So I
take fetuses from women and extract sperm from men. What a weird archetype.
Well, then that starts crossing.
It's all about sex with your mother.
Well, yeah, it's very Freudian, and of course we know most of Freud's stuff, or all of Freud's stuff, has been very well debunked by modern psychologists. However, you're right, it does then fall into this Jungian kind of idea. I don't necessarily think that, and I'm not putting words in his mouth, this is just simply my interpretation from going through his works, is that I don't think towards the latter part of his career that he was actually thinking that way. Because he really was at the coalface of a lot of this stuff and, having a lot of these experiences. So I dug around because I wanted to find out more about his approach to this kind of stuff. And one of the books that I picked up actually was where have I got it right here? I don't want to get the exact title, The Haunted Universe, right? which is kind of a play on, because he was in correspondence with John Keel, and that John Keel, just published, what was it, the Our Haunted Reality or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was like, sorry, I'm losing my voice again. So he,
oh, this is old.
Yeah, it's an old book. It's been republished back in, I think, 2006 by Anomalous Books. But basically in that particular book, which I'll go into in a moment, it's really fascinating to look about how he's like, well, all of this is generated by the mind. However, when something weird happened to me, it's not generated by the mind. And he uses this, and that's, again, this kind of inference that I'm taking with this. But let me give you one example, right? So he describes, a list of weird experiences that, people have. And he says much of this, though, UFOs, hauntings, religious miracles, all this kind of psionic force stuff, it's generated within the truly powerful human consciousness. Like, we shouldn't dismiss that. We shouldn't, the human consciousness is extremely powerful at projecting phenomena. And he suggests that people like John Keel and Ivan Sanderson actually manifested their own experiences themselves. And of course, John Keel and Sanderson had a wide variety of very strange things. John Keel with the Mothman, Ivan Sanderson with weird time anomalies and dinosaurs.
Keel reminds me of the whole tulpa creation from the fictional writer scenario.
Yes. Because you're right, because Keel was a writer.
Keel was a writer. Most of his early stuff was fiction. Especially in the later books, you could tell he would elaborate with fictional flourishes in his non-fiction reports.
Yeah.
And so that idea of Keel producing some of these encounters unknowingly creating these tulpic encounters makes sense to a degree.
It does make sense, right? So if Rogo's believing that some abductees, I don't think he's saying it's everyone, but he's just being very broad, in what he's describing from what I read. But it's like, it's a psychic manifestation. So when you have people that look at the phenomena, they too generate these things. It doesn't make it any less real. It doesn't make it that they're lying or that they're making it up. They're generating it subconsciously, or unconsciously, I should say. And they are having these experiences due to the strong psychic energy.
Well, a good example would be when Keel showed up at a friend's house and, came in, sat down, had a drink, had a chat, and then left. And Keel was like 100 miles away.
Yes.
In a different
the
state.
doppelganger. And who else that happened?
So Keel's interpretation was, there's someone going around impersonating me. There's someone who's disguised as me, convincing my friends that it's me, but it's actually someone else, or it's one of these alien forces or some other force. But really, that aligns with some kind of spontaneous supernormal ability, right?
You're right. Actually, like a spontaneous splitting of you. So, and this is where, again, it comes back to intention, right? So when those reports came about of people having these interactions, there was all the Men in Black side of things. And I think that's when you hear these stories, it's like, well, was this some kind of Man in Black decoy or something that was masquerading as Keel to cause trouble for him? But I also wonder, Keel was very intent as he got deeper and deeper into this research. He obviously was it's borderlines on obsessive, right? About trying to get to the bottom of this. So that in itself can generate a psychic form of him. So while he's away 100 miles doing something, he's still going around, in inverted commas, carrying out his research.
Yeah, right.
So that energy was still there. So there's nothing necessarily nefarious about it. It's just that it's been manifested. And it's like, Rogo spoke about this, in fact, because he started talking about like manifestations, spontaneous teleportations, these sorts of things, because you've got abductees that would have an experience, or you've got UFO experiences and people that were non-experiencers as well. But all of a sudden, they would start having mysterious teleportations of items from their home. And this kind of lies in the realm of the poltergeist. However, Ivan Sanderson, apparently, according to Rogo, got in contact with people that worked within, I guess the military-industrial complex and government circles. And they claimed that apparently the US powers that be have been conducting teleportation experiments. And I'm like, well, maybe, but I don't think that's because all this
So why is that happening in the homes of abductees?
Exactly. And all this weird teleportation stuff has been associated with psychical phenomena back to the 1800s. So I don't necessarily think that's the answer as to what's going on there. But Rogo was quite forward in that, look, when you look at the Men in Black stuff and this kind of thing that fits into it, it's all very strange. It seems to be beyond human psychic projection. There is actually an independent party that's on the outside conducting this. And so Rogo, as he's digging through this stuff, right, in the 1970s, like 1976, he himself, after looking into the Men in Black phenomena through John Keel and the weird, strange telephone calls that's connected to that kind of stuff, not telephone calls from the dead, just those weird metallic phone calls that John Keel was getting apparently from these entities. Well, he himself had been in contact with Dr. Thelma Moss. Now, Dr. Thelma Moss, we've mentioned her research in the past. She was at UCLA. She was a well-known researcher even back then. And apparently, Rogo had spoken to her about a wide range of phenomena. And when the phone rang, or when he was trying to call her, Barry Taff, who was her assistant, picked up the phone. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, she's not here at the moment. And so Rogo's completely normally. He's like, yeah, okay, no worries. And he hangs up the phone. Now, later that day, at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Rogo was lying on his couch at home. And he's like, oh, I've got to call Thelma Moss back. I've got to give her a call because I've got to follow up on whatever information he was seeking. And then he's like, oh, you know what? I'll do it later. So he kind of rolled over on the couch. Now, approximately 2 hours later, 6 o'clock, the phone rings and it's Barry Taff. And he's like, oh, yeah, hi. And he said, oh, I'm just returning a call. And he's like, what call? This is Rogo saying to Taff, what call? What are you talking about? And Taff's like, well, at 4 o'clock this afternoon, you called and requested for me to call you back. And Rogo's like, I absolutely didn't do that. I didn't. So for Rogo, this was some type of impression to him that his intention to call that lab, even though he'd wanted to call Thelma Moss, because Barry Taff was there, some thought form or projection of him had actually picked up the phone or somehow tapped into that phone and had called. So for him, it's like, okay, in a way, it kind of reinforced this psychic potential, this unconscious ability that we have to project these kind of things.
And what a great supernormal ability.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
have like a psychic assistant.
That I need to do something. You have a nap and you wake up and it's done. Some aspect of you is driven by the notion to do the task and does the task.
What's odd about these sorts of things, though, it seems like it was only after Rogo was like deeply into this research. Like he was deep in the research and obviously was dedicating a lot of his mental energy towards it. Then it manifested. Because he'd been doing this research for a long time, right? But as he got deeper and longer, it's like this whole thought form effect. It's like you give it more energy, so much energy that it must have to cross a threshold to allow you to do that. But it's completely spontaneous. So this comes back to this idea that these weird teleportations that are going on with people when they have, like rocks appear in their home or keys disappear, that kind of stuff, was a result of this psychic energy that's somehow releasing itself as like some type of release valve for people. I'm not entirely sure that that's exactly what's going on. I tend to still, go with the idea that there is a third party, a third non-human intelligence, which is involved in all this kind of stuff. But around this point, Rogo's like, yep, it's probably being generated by your mind. And he, kind of repeats this in books like Minds in Motion, The Riddle of Psychokinesis, which I'll link to in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself. But one book that I did grab, and I got a physical copy of this actually. It's The Infinite Boundary. Here it is, Spirit, Possession, Madness, and Multiple Personality. Now this was published in paperback in 1988. But this, I think, kind of, it gives me the impression that as much as Rogo is focusing on this all being within the mind, certainly by this point in his career, I think somewhere it was like, it's not all within the mind. Yeah. It's something which is external, which, after doing this for so long, I tend to agree with. So let me talk about some of the stories that come up here. And he writes, these parapsychologists and psychologists themselves have been dealing with this for quite some time. And, you and I have spoken about this many times on the show, Ben, the idea of spirit possession, the spirit attachment, the invasion of non-living entities, usually formerly human entities that attach themselves to people and then start to influence them and start to change their lives, sometimes for the better, very rarely for the better, but mostly for the worse. But, Rogo points out that these hallucinations and delusions that, have been picked up by psychologists for decades, there seems to lurk beneath some form of paranormal perception. It's like you don't even need to be fully possessed by one of these things. It's like you just simply need to have some type of influence from it for it to grant you some type of ability. It's like, for whatever reason, let's say that spirit possession does exist, or discarnate spirits that come along and I shouldn't say interfere, but interact with you.
Influence, yeah.
They influence you. Once they do this, not only do they, influence you for their own means and purposes, but they also do it for the sense that it will give you a view of the infinite boundary. Hence why the book is called The Infinite Boundary, right?
Okay.
It's this thin but infinite barrier, of this side and the next. And of course, the reason why people find these sorts of things so fascinating and intriguing is because it kind of reinforces the idea that there is something on the other side. Now, really, this is what it comes down to. It comes down to, well, is it just a mental illness, or is it that there is life after death and unfortunately spirits are left behind or for whatever reason don't move on and they're trapped here? So in this book, it's got a collection of cases. It's, as you can see how wide this book is. It's got a collection of reports in it, but there's just a couple that I want to focus on that are really kind of juicy and really give you both sides of the coin as to why this is not necessarily generated by within the mind and why it's something which is a very tangible kind of thing, that there is a spirit or there is some type of third party that's involved in this kind of stuff. So I'll start with the story of Frederick Thompson. So Frederick Thompson, and this book, this first chapter or these early chapters are kind of a biography of Hyslop. Now, of course, Professor James H. Hyslop, if you recall him, he was a researcher back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who was starting to understand this psychical phenomena that was taking on. That was this wave that people were picking up. And he would obviously publish his works, and people, much like we do today, get in contact with him and say, hey, I've got something that's not right, something's going on. So in the early 1900s, Frederick Thompson, he's from New Bedford in Massachusetts. He's a craftsman. And out of nowhere, he suddenly became this accomplished artist, like incredibly accomplished artist. And, this is a gift as well. And if you look at artists, like anyone can say they're an artist, right? But for someone to really be able to paint in a way that it's like a Renaissance painting, like
it takes years to build the technique.
Years and years and years and years. And even after all that practice, I think there's something else involved. That's why it's a gift, right? There's something that, allows you to do this. So he'd never been accomplished in that sense, but all of a sudden he was. But the reason why he was is because he felt that he was being influenced by something that he couldn't quite put his finger on. He felt that there was something that had come into his sphere, if you will, that was causing him to suddenly, have these impressions. And that was becoming very disturbing for him. Like he was uncomfortable. That's why he contacted Hyslop. So when he contacted Hyslop, he's like, oh yeah, I met this artist down at, I don't know, he was going for a walk one day and he went past the shore and there was this artist that was there, a Robert Swain Gifford. And, he'd just strike up a casual conversation with this guy. There was nothing serious in it. But this was an artist. And the reason is because he would sit there with his easel and he would be painting at the ocean, and Thompson would go down to enjoy the summer air and the sea air. And this would kind of start this little relationship with them. And he said he walked into a gallery, right? And because he happened to be in New York, and he wanders into this gallery. And when he does, he says he looks at this painting and suddenly he's projected into it. And it's not like when you look at an exceptional piece of art and it doesn't happen often, but there's some times where if you've wandered into a gallery or you've gone into a store or something and you see something you're really taken with it, like it grabs your attention. And this was beyond that. He actually all of a sudden was thrust into this space where it was like a hologram around him. He was enveloped by it. He could feel the wind up against his face. He could hear like a crow in the background or a seagull. And it was just like, for a moment, he was there. And he's like, oh my God, like what's happening? He kind of comes back. And he finds out that this painting is by Robert Swain Gifford, the guy that he'd met, this artist down at the beach.
Sorry, where did he jump into this painting? Where was this?
It was
he saw
an art gallery in New York.
Oh, just randomly saw it.
Just randomly, right? And so when he wanders through this art gallery, he finds out that apparently his former acquaintance, not even a friend, is dead. He had no idea he was dead, right?
And he had no idea this painting was from this acquaintance he had.
No, but he said he'd been getting these impressions, like these impressions had been coming through that he couldn't work it out, like he couldn't see what was happening. So Hyslop was rather a renegade for the time, where he was like, well, let's get you with a psychic and we'll see what we can find out, what's going on. Like very obvious. It was very obvious that there was something that was beyond just normal psychology here that needed to be assessed. So in 1907, January 1907, they meet with Margaret Gould, and she's like in just a standard kind of, not really a full-on seance, but, like a mediumship is taking place. And she's like, oh, there's an artist. There's this, and she doesn't know anything, right? She's like, there's this artist. There's this sense of an artist. He's in the room. And straight away, both Hyslop and Thompson are like, yeah. I mean, now, this is addressed. Is it possible that she's picking up telepathically? It's like the living agent hypothesis that she's picking up on what they're thinking about. But she's like, oh, and he died suddenly. It wasn't suicide, but there was like a pain. And it just so happens that Gifford died from rheumatism of the heart, right, which would have been immensely painful. And of course, that's why it was sudden as well. It must have affected the electricals, and that was it. So they pull that out, but she kind of wanes. She doesn't have enough power to kind of pull things through. So Hyslop is like, look, I'll take you to another medium. And he takes him to Minisul. And as they're there, she's like, oh, there's a form in the room, and he's trying to influence the sitter. And the sitter obviously being Thompson, who's obviously sitting there. And he's like, oh, there's something you need to go and seek out, this scene that you're seeing. So around this time, what's been taking place is that Thompson has been sketching these drawings, right? He's been sketching these drawings. And if you bring up image number 1, Ben, that I've sent over to you, with these drawings, this is a sketch that just came to his mind, but it was something that was very vivid for him. He was like, I need to draw this. I need to cast this. And there's nothing that spectacular about it. It looks like a bunch of trees sitting on a hill. And again, it's a pencil sketch, so there's not any detail in it. But he gives it to Hyslop as like a piece of evidence for him to keep. He's like, just hang on to this because, for whatever reason, we might need it later on. And so then he embarks on what is known as the Psychic Odyssey. This is after meeting with these psychics. He's like, I have to go and seek out this impression that I have in my mind. I have to go and find it. So he goes tropesing through the English islands. And as he does, something else that Scott Rogo wrote about in another book actually is etheric music, right? Now, it has nothing to do with this, but the crux of that was that there's many stories of people that hear music of the other world. Well, it just so happens that as Thompson is wandering about trying to see this image, and he's like looking at these landscapes, and he's just traveling as far as he can, and he's trying to find these trees, and he has this impression of this gnarled tree. He says as he's seemingly getting closer, he hears like bells and music and noises and sounds that are instruments, but he's not entirely sure, but they're otherworldly. It's this otherworldly music that's playing to him as he's moving through.
Yeah, bells are often described as with people that hear these supernatural sounds.
Yeah, as he's looking for these trees from this psychic painting that he has. Now, eventually, he comes over this hill and he sees what he thinks is the sign, right? This site of what he's seen. And he looks at these trees. He's like, it can't be these trees. And suddenly this voice comes through. Now, don't bring up the next image yet. Just wait.
Right.
Because I saw you reach to grab that one. I'm like, just leave it for a second. But this voice comes booming through. And the voice is like, you must come back here. And when you come back here, I will help you. You must come in the autumn when the leaves are red. It's like, what? Like, where is this voice coming from? And I don't know whether or not it's actually audible, but it's a booming voice within him. So he's then instructed by this voice to head behind this collection of trees, and he does. And when he heads behind this collection of trees, he finds the initials RSG 1902 carved into the bark. So it's Robert Swain Gifford.
It's his pal.
It's the guy who 5 years previously had carved his initials into this tree. Yeah. It is this tree, this thing that he sketched, right? So how extraordinary that he should sketch something like this with never being there before, having no knowledge of this area whatsoever, and yet he finds it after being seemingly infested or taken over by the spirit of this dead artist.
Can I show the second image?
Well, not yet, because what comes up next, right, is that he decides what I should do is visit the widow of Gifford. So he does, and he goes and makes an appointment to see her, and she's like, oh, I must show you his studio. And he's like, oh, yes, please. So he's taken down into the studio, and she kind of pulls the door aside, and as she does, there's this painting left on the easel. Now you can play number 2.
Oh.
This is the unfinished painting by Gifford, his last piece that he had left before he had died.
It's the same thing.
It's exactly the same thing. So we don't ever find out what this spirit is doing, right? But I get the impression here that it's like this is the old trope of unfinished business. It's like he had this one piece of art that he wanted to finish and he had no way of finishing it. So he tapped into this guy who he tried to get to finish it, really.
Yeah, the whole unfinished business thing with spirits comes up a lot in my segment because you're surrounded by these ancient artifacts and there's all these stories of hauntings, but often what's haunting the place is some curator who was responsible for all these items and never finished cataloging them.
Really?
And so his ghost is still there to this day. Like, I've got to catalog all these tiny jewels from ancient Egypt.
That's actually not surprising, because one of the things that seemingly comes up in many of these cases of spirit possession or spirit influence is that the person doesn't know they're dead.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what they do is they just keep on going about their work. They keep on going about their routine. And as such, it's like, yeah, but in this particular circumstance with this story with Thompson, it's quite clear he knows that he can't do it. And maybe we'll understand why in a moment, because it seems like they cannot, no matter what they do, they can't manipulate physical items. So it's not like you can just be a ghost and you can, poltergeist style finish a painting. You need to use a human surrogate really to allow you to do that.
So is this going somewhere? Is there meaning behind this beyond just a random connection to his friend? Is there a reason that he's reached out to him from beyond the grave?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that he clearly wanted to finish this, but he saw potential in Thompson. Because Thompson was...
He just wants to finish the painting.
Yeah, but he wants to finish the painting, right? And it's, any means possible. So he's utilizing Thompson, who did have artistic flair. He was like I think he was a glass crafter or something like that.
It looks finished. Just put your initials on it.
Done, right?
It looks finished.
Well, yes. So after, obviously, he sees this and he's completely shocked by it. But then Thompson, he starts to do more paintings, right? And as he does more of these paintings, they start to be assessed by critics and art experts who had seen Gifford's work. And one leading art, expert looks at one of these paintings and insists, he's like, no, this must have been done by Gifford. And like, no, it was done by Thompson. And he's like, well, somehow there's this very specific, and look, I'm not an artist, so I have no idea how this works, but apparently there's almost like a signature in the way that people do things like sunlight and shadow interplay.
Oh, yeah, there'd be technicalities that would be revealed.
Yes.
It's like, you're like your signature.
It's a signature technicality. Yeah. And he's like, this is rather astonishing, because Thompson has exactly the same signature as what Gifford does. And he says it's exquisite. Like it's a 1 in a million that someone would have this ability, and yet somehow he does. So at this point, I think Hyslop attempted to actually establish contact to Gifford himself, right? Through a seance or something. Through a seance, through a psychic link, because he was convinced that Thompson's not going crazy. Thompson's not insane. Initially, there'd been suspicion that he might have had an organic brain problem, that he was suffering from.
I was going to ask, was he bonked on the head? Because you have all these modern stories of some English guy getting bonked on the head and he's a musical genius.
There's a bunch of those in that book. Yeah, there are people suffering from head injuries and those sorts of things, and all of a sudden developing, these talents and abilities. Actually, there was one. I'll tell you in a second. I'll come back to it. But with Hyslop, he's like, okay, we'll make contact with Gifford to see what we can do. And they do set up this other session. I can't recall which psychic it's with. I didn't put it in my notes here. But at one point, they're kind of trying to work out, like, is it Gifford, or is it just some low-level spirit, or is it coming from their mind? What is this thing? And at some point in the session, she's like, oh, did he die from smoking? Like, is that why? Because he smoked. And like, no, he doesn't smoke. And she's like, well, there's a stick in his mouth. Like, he's sitting. And it turns out later on, they find out through, I believe, the wife, or I should say ex-wife, the widow, that he used to have this, this subtle nuance of when he would paint, he'd put a twig in his mouth, like a cigarette.
That's weird.
And to a psychic, it looked like a cigarette, but no, it was. So this was confirmation that, they were dealing, because these two men didn't know this at the time. So how is this information coming through? So this kind of eliminates...
confirmation.
That's right. It's veridical confirmation. It kind of like rules out the possibility that these guys were projecting this into the psychic. Still supernatural, but not supernatural in the sense of it being a third-party independent spirit. So the next thing she did do, though, was that she described his visit to the Elizabeth Islands. And like, she shouldn't have known that, and somehow she did. So for them, it was validation that, she was definitely picking up on something. So... things kind of quiet down, but then on the 15th of June in 1908, they hold another seance with Miss Sewell in Boston. And Hyslop at this point was like, okay, I'm out. I'm not pulling out any new information about this. It's like apparently there was unknown reasons for why Hyslop pulled out at this point, but there is, reading between the lines, some suggestion that I think he freaked out a bit. I think it's like it started to become a little bit too real. There was a bit of psychic interference is what I've written here. There was just something that wasn't quite right. But he did get pulled back in like what happens with so many researchers in this field, it's like you get these, rather exceptional cases and you get pulled back into them. And he did. And it just so happens that a psychic by the name of Mrs. Cleveland started engaging in automatic writing, bringing Gifford through. And so when Gifford was coming through, guess what? One of the last things he did in automatic writing, like what you said before, he kind of signed his name, and then everything kind of petered out.
Okay.
So for me, I'm like, is that what it was?
But the activity finished.
It all just died down. Nothing new actually came after 1910.
And was the painter still painting in that style? Or did he stop painting?
Well, Thompson, no, I thought that too. Thompson actually, and this is what Rogo continued to do, was to look up. It's not easy like you can look up someone's career today. He's like, well, what happened to this guy? Well, he ended up pursuing an artistic career, and he became so successful that he got taken in by a group of professional painters, a very prestigious group of professional painters that just skyrocketed his career. And as of 1926, that's the latest reference that Rogo can find to him, he was still involved in this art. And all of a sudden, his fortunes had turned around because of this painting. So I don't know whether or not the spirit had left and then had left the abilities.
Yeah, I'm interested in the technicalities of how that works, because if he's suddenly painting in the exact style of this dead friend, has the dead friend in some form possessed his mind, possessed his body?
Well, at least influencing. That's what's being said. Like those two seances where it was like, yeah, there's a guy here and he's influencing you, but we don't find out what happened because sadly Hyslop himself crossed the infinite barrier in 1920. So it's like, not much else is.
I guess there is the sense that all art is channeling something.
Yeah, I get that.
All inspiration comes from some external source is my position.
Yeah.
I don't think inspiration is internal at all.
No, I think though, in some way though, that takes away from the capacity of the human spirit of the individual to be able to spontaneously generate something beautiful. I think that they can. But in saying that, yeah, you have to wonder, because as I said before, it was a gift. Like there's something additional, more than like it's something greater. And that's why some really great work of art, you really do feel like you're sensing something from it, which is beyond that of the artist. It's like, what's that saying? It's like the work of art becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And then maybe that is some type of divine inspiration or something. But then you have the other side of the coin, right, with these sorts of stories. So that one ended up, rather, it didn't end badly, right, with so many of these cases that they do. Spirit possession, influence, they normally end up quite bad. But there's this story that comes of, and we only know him as S. Henry. That's the only name we have for him. But the question is this psychic phenomena, does it leave a physical impact? This is something that Hyslop was intrigued by. And so parallel to the case of what was going on with Thompson, although a little bit later, but kind of around the same time, he got contacted by this Henry in April of 1906. And he's like, I need your help. I know that you're a parapsychological researcher. A lot of strange things have been happening. My wife has died. And right after my wife died, I suddenly started experiencing a wide range of very bizarre events. And I feel like my personality is changing, and I feel like there's something which is causing a great deal of trouble for me. He says the changes to my personality are drastic, right? So he's a coachman, apparently. He works for a country estate somewhere. And he said a lot of this started when all of a sudden one day he heard this fluttering thing. He says it's like a bird, but it wasn't a bird. And he spun around to look, and he says he can't see it, but he can hear it. And it's kind of this thing that kind of comes flying out of the corner of the room.
What flew into him or something?
It's like fluttering and making noise, and it doesn't directly fly into him, but I think it does. Like it doesn't say it does, but it's like, it's in him. And he's like, from that moment, change just overcame me.
We started wearing frocks.
No, actually, that's one thing. Like the first thing in this book actually is about a young boy who suffers from gender dysphoria, and very controversial today. But back then, it was like he ultimately it turned out because his mother's like the 70s, right?
Yeah,
and his mother very Freudian. His mother was really possessive, but really had issues with him in the gender dysphoria.
Yeah,
but she'd contributed to it like his entire life. Like his entire life, she's like, wear makeup and wear my dresses and. Would keep him away from school and all this kind of stuff. And it just so happens that he gets a job and his employer, a cliche I know, is a fundamentalist Christian. And she's like, my husband is a doctor, but also a fundamentalist, and we know how we can fix you up. We could take you, we could pray over you. And it just, I think it's actually more just coincidental than what I don't think they were expecting it. But it kind of seems like they run this like exorcism, and some entity actually does get out. Like some entity is expelled.
Some old bag pops out.
Pretty much.
It's like Baldwin and Edith Fiore, they had a bunch of cases of gender dysphoria, and usually they were just possessed by an entity of the opposite gender.
Yeah.
Who couldn't deal with being dead, didn't want to move on, and wanted to keep living their life as normal, obviously, of the gender they were when they were alive.
That really does kind of reinforce it through this book of like, it's just entities regardless of gender. And it's like they just want to keep on going about doing what they do, and they don't care what they inhabit.
Yeah, like someone who's a smoker wants to keep smoking. Someone who's an alcoholic wants to keep drinking. They don't lose those attachments when they pass on.
Correct. And so then it causes his trouble. And of course, the kicker to the story is, and why it seemingly is like, well, it worked, was because he suddenly stopped. The spirit was kind of gone, and next day he comes to work. So he'd been taking estrogen. And so the story is, right, that apparently he was wearing a bikini at one point, and like basically within a week, his tits are gone. Okay. And they're like, oh, well, the spirit left. I'm like, and as Rogo rightly points out, he's like,
so this is the physical changes, right?
Rogo's like, it doesn't, and I agree, it doesn't work that way. You just don't suddenly stop taking, estrogen, and all of a sudden the physical changes occur in a week.
Yeah, but in the cases of any kind of possession, we've seen from the Exorcist stories, there can be massive physical changes in the faces, in the body form, in the strength, and all these things.
Right, which is why I'm saying, and why Rogo is kind of pointing out, is that this is not a standard actual gender dysphoria case.
Even in multiple personality cases, there can be drastic physical changes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what's highlighted in this. So this wasn't gender dysphoria, this was spirit possession in this circumstance. And then, all of a sudden his life kind of returns to normal. But in saying that, he does continue to have fleeting moments of it, and it's like, well, does the spirit still kind of linger, or or is it actually genuine gender dysphoria, and they got it really wrong? It's open to so much interpretation and such a controversial thing. I don't think there's any simple answer to it, but I think it does serve as an excellent example of not just gender dysphoria, but a wide range of psychological concerns and emotional issues that people have that may be caused by an external dead entity.
Yeah, like we've always said, it's this huge blank spot with psychotherapy, and the entire field is missing the unseen realm, and the unseen realm has a massive influence on every individual.
Absolutely, it does. And I've got a case for you that actually highlights that in a moment. But going back to S. Henry, so this is along the same lines, because he's like, my personality has changed. This entity kind of flew around me and into me, and now I've got all of these. And the guy was essentially like, it's quite long, but it goes through how this guy is having breakdowns. Like, this is not a healthy kind of like
panic attacks.
But beyond that, like was literally going insane. Like, he was having problems with insanity, and his employer was like, this guy's a complete nutcase. Like,
what was he seeing? Things,
hearing things,
voices.
Voices coming through, like a whole wide range of it was just sending him like, and in a modern stance, or even back then, I know it's which one was this, 1906. It was like, no, the guy's schizophrenic. I think this was before that term schizophrenia had really, but it's like, it sounds like he's suffering from schizophrenia. But Hyslop was like, I don't know, there's something else here. So he was like he went quiet for a while, and then he contacts Hyslop back in 1907. And he's like, oh yeah, there's now a poltergeist in my barn. So where he was he was a coachman, and he was living on this property for the estate, right? And this estate had a barn, and he was residing in the barn. And he's like, yeah, there's poltergeist in it. And so he's having all these weird personality changes, and then a poltergeist suddenly shows up. It's like, well, hang on. So I think Rogo included this to suggest, well, is this like a really great example of how the mind, like the guy's going nuts, it's now manifesting externally. But I don't think that's the case.
That's some weird,
right?
backward reasoning.
Very backwards, because this is what happens, right? He's like, he starts getting this issue of where he said, I was just sitting there one day, and I suddenly started to see the air boil before me. Like the air itself just changed. And in this boiling air, this small cloud of something, this white puffy cloud kind of appeared, and it started moving towards me. And I reached out to this thing and started feeling it, and he said it felt like moist silk. I was like, ew, gross. And he was like, it's my wife. I was like, oh.
Are you serious? It's his wife.
Well, he thinks it's his wife. and because it then sits on his head and then kind of like merges into him. And it's almost like, dude, you're like, just stay. Yeah, well, I'm like, you just put your hand into moist silk. I don't know what you're putting your hand into. Although
putting his head into it.
Yeah, Brad Steiger said that he touched a ghost, and he claims that it was like he claims it was like putting your hand into packed snow, like how freezing it was.
Oh.
But this was like something completely different. I'm thinking ectoplasm, like maybe that's what he's experiencing. But he said after this happened, he then started experiencing things like he suddenly heard this sharp laugh and this splash of water behind him, and he's like, "Oh my God, it's not my wife." Like, he's wise enough to understand, because obviously he's grieved. And this is what these entities do. These entities, they prey upon people in states of high trauma. So he's lost his wife. And it's like masquerading as his wife, but it's not his wife. And fortunately, he's got the wherewithal, even though he's going crazy, to be like, holy crap, this isn't my wife. Like, this is some type of external spirit. And it is. Like, it is some type of external spirit.
Or something.
Who knows? So in May of 1907, Hyslop was like, let's contact your wife through automatic writing.
Oh, here we go.
Like, what a great idea. And apparently, well, this was like at his, request, but he's like, no, I've got it all worked out. Now I can put myself into a trance and I can do it all by myself. And he does. Like, he puts himself into a trance, further allowing more of these things to start. Opening himself up to a manifestation of these things that are just coming through. And so he starts having, and this is what it comes down to, right? This is where I'm like, what's this all about? Like, why is this entity preying upon this poor grieving man? Like, why is it doing it this way? What's it trying to do? He says, well, see, there's excitement that all of a sudden, like, yeah, this is all terrifying and all crazy, but hey, I've got this new skill and I can put myself into a trance and I can, do automatic writing. He says, however, one time when he was doing automatic writing, he got this electric shocking sensation pain down his arm. He's like, what the hell is that? And he was flung out of his body. And he's never been out of body before. He's like, what the hell is going on? And he stands up and spins around. And meanwhile, like putting on like a suit, some entity is just like
putting on his body.
Putting it like basically let's get him like putting on a pair of tight jeans, like sliding into his body. And he's like, no. And we don't know what happens, but somehow he manages to stop this effect from taking place. But he says electrical currents would sizzle through me. It's like this thing would start moving through him. And he said he was actually becoming the object of psychic attack, which like clearly like this thing is trying to force him out of his body so it can take over. It doesn't care what's going to happen to his spirit, but it's just like, here, use these practices, use these things. It's all good for you. Kick him out of his body when he's in this vulnerable state. So around this time, Henry writes to Hyslop, this is on the 1st of June, and he's like, yeah, like this being is trying to enter my body and I'm actually feeling like now I'm on the edge of insanity. Like this fixation is just driving me to the limit. It's like I'm hearing raps. I've got this feeling in my hand, in my head. I'm electrocuted. I'm scared. And then he makes this passing reference. He's like, oh, and all of a sudden, this fluid suddenly started residing in the left side of my stomach or left side of my body near my stomach, and it flows through my body, disintegrating my personality.
Ugh.
And I'm like, what the hell?
So not physically there, he's just sensing something, right?
It's a burning fluid and you're right, yeah, it's not physical, but immediately Hyslop, who is very for the 1900s, the guy is really cutting edge because he's like Kundalini.
Oh, really?
Straight away, he's like, this is Kundalini. And he references the work of Dr. Richard Katz, who wrote a book called Boiling Energy, which I need to look up. But this Boiling Energy book kind of describes this same fluid that's being described by Henry, of like this fluid that's moving through his body. And around this time, it was like a week later, Hyslop receives a letter from Henry's employer. And she's like, you got to come out here. You got to deal with something. He's totally lost it. Like he's completely off the edge. He's completely nuts. And so in 1908, Hyslop is like, I have to do everything I can to help Henry. I don't know what to do. Like, it's like, what do I do with this guy? Because this guy is done. And now the Kundalini energy, which seemingly has been out. This is my interpretation. This entity couldn't get in, like it was trying to get in. So what it did is it activated that Kundalini to dissolve his personality.
Yeah, but in a lot of the Kundalini stories, it does drive people nuts. And so it could have been that from the start. We've covered a bunch of these personal experiences from people who were on the very edge of insanity because of this this rising, awakening energy that they didn't understand and couldn't control.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
And it does open you up to extrasensory perceptions and spiritual vision.
You're absolutely right. But I think what preceded all of this was that entity flapping around before, and it's like that started it. So for me, I'm like, and this is just simply my interpretation, because you're absolutely right with like, yeah, that Kundalini changes people, but that Kundalini is like people trying to activate it and trying.
Not always. A bunch of the cases have just been random.
That's true, but like this guy suffered a trauma, and then he sees this like, and the spirit comes along. It's like, for me, it's like it's followed this progression of an entity trying to take over him.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you fix it? So I'm like, there must be some really elaborate, insane way of fixing this. Nope. Hypnotism.
Oh.
So what happens is Hyslop is like, I don't know what to do.
Hypnotize, speak to the entity, tell it to GTFO, done.
I don't even think that's done. They just get the ASPRN, which is what the American Society for Psychical Research, and they're like, let's just do some hypnotism with this guy. And Hyslop actually wrote, it's like, it was very simple but highly effective. It worked wonders. After this, the symptoms ceased. He got a better job and became a psychical researcher.
Well, so they hypnotized him and said, in 3, 2, 1, you won't be a psychotic freak. 3, 2, 1, you're back in the room.
Stop being a crazy bitch. And it was done. Like he was back to normal. But yeah, he became a psychical researcher, which was like, okay, that's a way to go. So then, so these are the two sides of the coin with this kind of stuff, of where it's like, you can have a possession, but it's not necessarily bad. It can sometimes grant you abilities, but it still influences your life. It still has an impact upon you, but then it can send you completely crazy on the other side. But then there's other stories, right? So from October of 1912, Hyslop got this story or a letter from a singer by the name of Ida Ritchie. She's like, oh, yeah, I've read some of your research, and I just wanted to talk to you about what's been happening to me. She's a successful singer, a heavenly voice, and an amazing voice for her size, and it was just, none of it made any sense. And she's like, yeah, this happened because I got possessed by an opera singer.
Oh, really?
And he's like, well, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, yeah, I was involved in a case of automatic writing, and while I was undergoing the automatic writing, I was possessed by a dead opera singer who had become an instructor in her life. And so now she'd become an opera singer. And there was nothing really that was bad about it. It's like her career had just gone down this path.
There's always a trade-off.
We know that.
There's always an exchange. Well, and often with these stories, especially in the East, you have some people with that attitude who say, well, if I'm getting all these benefits, what's the problem? But ultimately, this is my understanding, is any possessing entity is draining some essential force from you, some kind of essential energy. And you're also, it degrades your dignity as a human being, because you no longer have your own will.
Well, you're being used.
Yeah, exactly. You become a vessel for this other thing. Well, it's just gross.
And in some way, I feel like you're selling a bit of your soul in doing this. And if each... Like, I do believe in reincarnation, and I think that I'm not a great spiritual thinker, but I wonder, well, maybe every lifetime it's like you're given a set of things that you have to overcome. That's the whole point of being incarnate. It's like you have challenges, right? But that's for you. And if all of a sudden you get a free pass because some entity comes in and gives you a bunch of talents, you lose the ability to overcome those challenges by yourself, and you basically don't pass the level.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You don't pass the grade.
From a technical level, these entities take your jing.
Right.
Which is the essential energy that every human being is born with, but it's a finite amount. And it's essential for every kind of spiritual progress you make in your life. The jing is required. So these entities, they come and they feed off the jing. They take the jing.
Does it feel like moist silk?
Probably.
Maybe that's what it is.
The idea with the fox spirits and the kitsune and all those ideas from the Eastern religions is, once, like the fox spirit, for example, once it gets enough jing, it can use that essential energy to form a physical body.
Oh, right.
So
I've heard this.
Once it takes enough of it, it can either take over your physical body or essentially create its own physical body.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the story of a tulpa walking the streets, but not quite. It's a different kind of thing.
Well, it's a parasitic tulpa. In a way, it's like, it needs energy to manifest, and that energy, and it's like there's a barrier though. So human beings, and I'll come to the story in a moment, but we do have this barrier. Call it an aura, if you will. Like that's one of the suspicions as to why we have an aura. It's not just showing, the color of your soul. It's also a protective barrier to preventing these things to getting in. It's like there's a built-in mechanism, a spiritual mechanism that we're all supposed to have, but for reasons like trauma and abuse and alcoholism and drug use and sexual addiction, all that kind of stuff, it degrades that aura or puts holes in that barrier. And these things come, and that's because they're predatory. They sit and wait. But they need to get enough, like they need to get enough access to people. So let's talk about another couple of cases before I get into that. I won't go into this in too great a detail, but the story I do want to mention is Doris Fisher. She's from Pittsburgh, born in 1889. She has this turbulent, horrible childhood. And she comes to Hyslop because essentially she seemingly is suffering from multiple personality disorder. It doesn't seem to be spirit attachment, and I'm not entirely sure that it entirely is at first, but it is later on because she's essentially, I think her mother or herself, or when she was 3 years old, her mother was flung off the bed or the baby was torn from her by the violent alcoholic father, and this like damages her emotionally, like as it would, right? She's 3 years old, and it seriously emotionally damages her. And then her mother sadly dies in 1906, I think. So when she's a young girl, and another trauma. And essentially all this is going on that as a young teen girl, she starts to show these aspects of multiple personality disorder where she has this Margaret. So apparently when she was flung off the bed as a 3-year-old, this secondary spirit kind of splintered inside her body called Margaret. And this Margaret kind of tried to protect her. But then when there was other losses and other traumas, this other thing kind of broke off as well, which was called sick Doris. That was a term that was used. But I'm not so sure. I mean, maybe Margaret is like another personality, a protected personality.
So sick Doris was emotionless with a wooden expression.
Yeah.
And a monotonous metallic voice.
Yeah.
Weird.
Isn't that weird? So immediately I'm like, is this sick Doris? Is it actually like a low-level spirit that's been hanging around?
Conceived a bitter hatred.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She was really angry. And so apparently Doris, as a young girl, she would have these moments of strange memory losses, but it was because the other entities were taking over. It's like she just had no recollection of what was going on. So long story short, she gets herself involved with the Reverend Franklin Prince, Reverend W. Franklin Prince and his wife, and they had her stay in the rectory because obviously she had all these problems with her father being this violent alcoholic, and they thought that they were just looking after a girl in need. But one night, the Reverend sees her physically fighting with herself while she's sleeping.
Oh, really?
And it's like not someone just having a bad dream. It's someone fighting something else. I don't know how else to describe it, but it really is like if you looked, it was like, are there two people in one person having a fight? That's really how it came across. Straight away, he's like, exorcism, like with
get him out.
Get it out, get it out. So he's like trying to perform this exorcism. And as it's happening, this powerful voice starts bellowing at him saying, you must get her out of this. You have to get her out of this. He's like, well, you have to pray. You have to pray. And this other voice starts going, why do you want her to pray?
Oh, wow. It's a full-on demonic possession.
Yeah. Well, it's not. I'm not so sure if it is demonic. I just think it's low level. I think it's just it's not full on biblical demonic stuff. It's just like a pissed off low level entity that saw a poor young traumatized girl that was like, there's a way that I can get myself back into this plane of existence. And he's like, why are you doing this? And they're like, because we love her. So it's like, this is not good.
Okay, but it's not demonic.
Not good. So December...
Not demonic.
Not demonic.
Not
demonic. It's just like very low level. So December 1915, Hyslop, with the assistance of Minnie Sewell, helps her recover actually from these beings. And it does. Like they use this kind of, I guess like a spirit release, an early form of spirit release to get rid of it.
It sounds just like the IFS therapy.
Yes,
because there's another entity called Sleeping Margaret, which was a 40-year-old that acted as a guardian to Doris who would help and aid with the efforts to basically
clear it out.
To clear Doris and remove these entities. And that's like the helper spirit that IFS always talks about, internal family systems.
Yeah, exactly. And that seemingly had manifested when like her initial trauma of that horrible thing that happened to her. But what was strange as well...
No.
During the process.
Sleeping Margaret literally said, I am a spirit sent by someone higher to guard Doris.
Oh.
She said, you would call me a spirit, a totally separate entity.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, you're right. It definitely does align with that IFS stuff. So yeah, then though, there was this follow-up though of where Mrs. Prince, so the Reverend's wife, was like, there's weird noises now shuffling through the house.
Uh-oh.
After they perform this exorcism. So this is a little bit different to a lot of the spirit attachment and internal family system stuff, is that exorcised it, but then it physically manifested in their house.
You've got to have a pig there. It's got to go into a pig.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you shoot the pig.
Yeah. and then cook it up. If you eat it,
you
does it
don't
come back
eat
into
it,
you?
'cause that
It's
releases
straight
it.
back in. Well, but basically, she heard like someone like walking through the coals downstairs that were stored in the basement, and she goes, and nothing's moved, and these things start moving through the house. But sadly, we don't really find out anything else because Hyslop died in 1920, and more details of this didn't really come out. So then the book goes into some of the other, figures that continued with this kind of stuff. And what are we at? Okay, let's go a little bit just quickly. You've got Dr. Titus Bull, whose work we've referenced before. And I'm mentioning this one because you made a good point before, Ben, about the injuries, right? He has a case of a Mr. C.E. He had a head injury. This head injury was the beginning of all of his problems. He suddenly became a compulsive and excessive masturbator, right? Just after this head injury. Now, for me, I'm like,
It's like some people become math geniuses, some people become musical geniuses. This guy, masturbation
compulsive
genius.
and excessive masturbator. But I'm thinking, well, I mean, if he suffered from a frontal lobe injury, then your impulse control is affected. So there's no spirit stuff going on here. But no. They're like, when you got time off from your masturbating, why don't you come to a seance? So he comes to a seance and they conduct this seance, and immediately, apparently, Dr. Bull is attacked, right? And he's attacked by some angry spirit that like hates Dr. Bull because he's trying to exorcise a spirit, right? So he attacks him. They then find out that there's a sexually disturbed spirit which has taken up residence inside Mr. C.E.
Surprise,
right?
surprise.
After the head injury. Well, it just so happens that he'd picked it up at another seance. So there you go. To be very careful when you go to these things because you have a head injury, your auric field,
It's damaged.
it's damaged.
It's a hole in it.
You're vulnerable to these things. You've got Mrs. KL. She was possessed by her nurse babysitter. It only came out later on, but apparently she wasn't evil, but she was just psychologically distressed. And it all had originated when this woman apparently was terrified of storms when this kid was a child. And so what she would do is when the storm came through, she would grab the child that she was supposed to be looking after and they would hide in the cupboard together. And this caused some type of bond. And when she passed on, because she was terrified, what did she do? She came and possessed this child, or who was now an adult. But then it goes into this Brazilian spiritualism. And you've got people like the healer Edson. My handwriting's terrible. Queiroz. He was talking about a guy he was interacting with named Matthew. And Matthew had an experience with what was considered to be a vampire spirit. So Hyslop looked into... not Hyslop. It was Titus Bull looked into this case. And because the Brazilian psychics readily believed that this kind of spirit possession was happening, he looked into his research. And this Matthew guy was skeptical about a lot of stuff that was going on with these particular Brazilian, psychics. But he went along to this thing and there was this woman there. And apparently in this particular session, and I don't know if it was witnessed by other people in the party, but certainly the medium is describing this woman has this cancerous growth on her face. It was this horrible cancerous growth. And the reason why she was now going to a Brazilian healer was because there was nothing that they could do to treat it. Like it was just completely out of control. But look, it's cancerous. But no, from the perception of the clairvoyant, this was a vampiric spirit that was stuck to the woman who was completely fascinated by her. The spirit was literally sucking the life energy from her face, from a large lesion or cancerous tumor that was present on her face. It had a grisly entity look about it. It had bulbous eyes. It was skeletal and followed her wherever she went. Edson then explained that in a case such as this, where the spirit is obsessing about you, it will become fixated and it will cause illnesses. It will become karmically derived and hold in place for as long as possible.
Gross.
This spirit was preventing this woman's recovery and presented a real block to her evolution as a person.
It was sucking the energy through the lesion.
Through her lesion on her face.
So using a straw or direct from the faucet?
It doesn't say. But basically, they proceeded to a dark room, it says, put on a red light, had a group of 14 people who essentially prayed and laid on hands on this woman and told her to project herself into a comfortable place. They managed to invoke this entity and got rid of it. Apparently, though, like that earlier case, right, in an extraordinary way, apparently they only saw her hours later. It was almost like the cancerous growth had completely gone. So it's like, you're totally right. You hit the nail on the head before where...
I did?
Yeah, you did, because you were like, this stuff, psychologically at the very least, is dismissed. It's completely dismissed. It's not possible. It doesn't happen. It's not real. And yet, though, as demonstrated in these cases, it can have a very detrimental physical effect upon people. But if you remove it, whether or not it's real, I mean, maybe this is an extreme nocebo effect. Who really knows? But if you remove it, people spontaneously recover.
Yeah, the physical body follows the non-physical.
Right. Absolutely. So it's like maybe we should start looking at the possibility of approaching this from this perspective. But it seems like we've gone so far down this path of materialism now that it's like it's too far. We've breached this barrier that we can't cross back over.
It doesn't really seem to work in the other direction. Like if you heal something on the physical body, if the underlying metaphysical, spiritual energy body, whatever you want to call it, is damaged, the problem will just come back, or it'll come back in a different form.
Yep, absolutely. So then we've got the work of Dr. Allison. Dr. Allison, and like it references some of these really well-known names. There's like M. Scott Peck, who wrote the book, is it The Road Less Traveled, if I recall? Like sensational book at the time. He apparently, while not necessarily believing in these things, saw during a seance or an exorcism a serpentine being ejected from someone. He's like, well, that's not something you see every day. Yeah, worms. It's all in the mind. But Dr. Allison claims that he could see auras, right? He could see auras, and he said he would deal with patients that were being psychically affected by these things. He wrote for Fate magazine. But he had this one case of a man who developed an alcohol problem. He didn't even like drinking alcohol, but he developed this alcohol, and he had an alcoholism, and he would actually fight himself, much like it was described with that young girl, with the Reverend. He would fight himself as he would be dragged into bars by his own body. And he would be told to pick up drinks. Yeah, it's like he wouldn't want to go, be like clinging onto the door, like, no, I don't want to drink. And then he would kind of like pulled in, but by his own body.
Like some Jekyll and Hyde scenario, switching back and forth?
Yeah,
like how does that even work?
I don't know how it works, but he would fight with his own body. So he was put under hypnosis, and it was found that he had this spirit possessing him. Like there was this spirit who was an alcoholic who had latched onto him while he was in Japan. So apparently during, I don't know if it must have been the Second World War, at the end of the Second World War, he was doing a tour of duty and he got in a fire. And he wasn't severely injured, but he was injured enough that he was in hospital and vulnerable. In the hospital, there was this alcoholic spirit just wandering around, and he caught it in the hospital. And he didn't know about it. He just brings it home, and all of a sudden he's this hopeless drunk because this spirit had gotten through to him. And this actually is a fascinating tale at the very end where Rogo references this case from a book that was put out by George G. Ritchie, but at the time he was a private. He died on December the 19th in 1943, and he was stationed at Camp, I'm sorry again, my handwriting, Barkley in Texas. I think I probably got that wrong. Barkley. He died of bacterial pneumonia, right? But apparently, according to the report, he suddenly found himself surprised by freedom. He kind of pulled himself out of this fleshy mass that turns out to be his body, and he said he was invisible. And he couldn't understand how all these people around him couldn't see him in the infirmary.
Sounds wonderful.
Well, he's actually excited about it. So he's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to wander about. So he starts wandering about and exploring, and he finds himself being drawn to this sailor's bar that was down the road. And
this is a classic story.
A very classic story, right? So he wanders inside, and when he wanders inside, he can see that there's all of these sailors. But with the sailors, there's sailors that are glowing, and there's sailors that aren't glowing.
Yeah.
And then he then notices that the sailors that aren't glowing, they're trying to grab the shot glasses, and their hands are going through the shot glasses. It's going through the tables.
Yeah, they're spirits.
They're spirits, right? He realizes that they're spirits. And if you recall with this story, he's like watching, just trying to understand what's happening. And he very rapidly realizes that they're dead entities, but they don't know they're dead. And all these guys are drinking. And it's actually really highlights, because sometimes we talk about spirit attachment. We're like, be very careful of drinking. It's actually like there's a threshold. As long as you drink enough that you're not drunk, you're okay.
Your field's okay. It's intact.
But some of these sailors, and look, they're sailors, so they drink hard. They're Australians. They're not Australians, but they drink like Australians. They fall down. They come falling down. And he said he watched as this aura around them kind of peeled away.
Yeah, there's a little hole.
There's a hole. And as it peeled away, these sailors, these non-living sailors, were jumping through the holes and like being sucked in and just disappearing.
Jumping into their bodies.
And he would watch as they would be picked up by the other living sailors and then kind of be dragged away, and there would be this kind of like change in their aura because they'd been possessed by these alcoholic spirits. He said they're thirsty spirits. It's funny because it's not that dissimilar to the Eastern philosophy of hungry ghosts. And all of a sudden, bam! Of course, he finds himself back in his body because he had an injection of adrenaline. They brought him back. And after this, he actually recorded this in the book. What was the book? Return from Tomorrow is the book that he published this in 1978. He became a psychiatrist after having this experience, because this firsthand experience of something is like, not many people see this, but as Rogo in the end, points out, he's like, well, he tread the infinite boundary just for a short period of time. He saw that infinite boundary.
Got a glimpse of what's really happening.
Yeah, got a glimpse of it. And it's just like, it really emphasizes that this stuff, I think, is real. Like, there's been so much psychical research for in excess of 100 years now, 120 years, 130 years, if not longer, maybe 150 years, that there was something more than just simply the material. And I know that we always come back to this, but it's like, it's just emphasized over and over and again with these stories. So what I'll do is I'll link to this book, The Infinite Boundary, in the show notes at mysteriousuniverse.org, including the other works that come from D. Scott Rogo. I may just dig back through phone calls from the dead. I'll link to that as well. But I see now it's $560-something. So I think it's available online at other locations, but I will link to it as well. But we've got a copy here, so I might dig through the boxes and just
what
pull
an
that up.
investment our library is.
Yeah, I know, with all the boxes that just at the back. But I'm running a bit long here, so what I'll do is on Tuesday, I want to go into more of the haunted universe, where it's like Rogo pretty much going, it's all in the mind, except for when this happens to me.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about some of these experiences that really do suggest that this isn't in the mind at all. This is a very real phenomenon that can have a physical impact upon the living.
We've got more examples of that coming up after the break in Ghosts of the British Museum from Noah Angel. We'll be looking at these incredible cases from the British Museum, not only of your typical hauntings, which I mentioned at the start of the show, but a bit of conspiracy as well. And some of the reasons why the spirits of the place are upset. Some modern changes they're not happy with. So we're going to go into that. That's all coming up on Plus. MysteriousUniverse.org/Plus. Sign up today. You get access to the extensions we do every single Friday. And of course, Plus members get an exclusive show every single Tuesday as well. You're getting more than double the content. If you sign up for Plus, sign up for the MU Max tier and you get access to our massive back catalogue going back
God knows how long
18 years now. There's a lot of stuff in there. MysteriousUniverse.org/Plus. Sign up today. Help support your favorite show. That's a wrap for this free edition of MU. If you're on Plus, stick around for the great stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.